So we're really diving into the world of Carmenere this time.
Yeah.
Like really getting to know this grape.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's got, a story that's almost as interesting as its flavor, I'd say.
See, and that's what I love about wine, right? It's like every bottle has this whole story behind it.
Totally.
And today we're going to unpack all that Carmenere intrigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to trace its roots from near extinction to like its Chilean comeback. And then, of course, we'll dive into what makes this varietal so unique.
Absolutely.
I think by the end of this, our listeners are going to be like, Carmenere Pro.
I love it. Well, let's start by going back in time a bit.
Okay.
Remember that article you shared about the phylloxera epidemic in the 19th century in Europe?
Yeah.
That's really where our story begins. Carmenere was originally a Bordeaux grape and like a key player in their famous blends.
Right, like one of the OG 6 grapes of Bordeaux.
Exactly.
But then phylloxera hit, and it was like devastating, especially for Carmenere. It's crazy to think it was almost wiped out completely.
It's true, yeah. I mean, could have been gone, really. But here's where it gets interesting. Some Carmenere vines had actually been shipped to Chile way before the whole phylloxera outbreak. And get this, because the vines look so similar to Merlot, for over a century, Chilean winemakers had been cultivating Carmenere unknowingly. They thought it was Merlot.
Whoa. Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's such a plot twist. I mean, can you imagine being one of those winemakers and then suddenly you're like, wait a minute.
Right. I mean, talk about a discovery.
I mean, that's like finding a long-lost sibling or something.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's a delicious grape.
That's right, exactly. And it was a huge deal for Chile, too. Like, this discovery completely changed the trajectory of their wine industry.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they were the caretakers of this resurrected grape.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've covered the history, the drama, the intrigue, but I think it's time to talk about the good stuff.
Yeah.
The taste. What am I in for when I take that first sip of Carmenere?
You're in for a treat. Think ripe, juicy red berries. You'll get raspberries, plums, maybe even some blackberry. But, and this is key, there's a little twist.
Uh-oh, what's the twist? This is where it gets good.
Right. The twist is that Carmenere has this signature spice.
Ah, yes. That peppery spice. It's so unique.
Exactly. A touch of black pepper, and depending on the wine, maybe even a hint of bell pepper. You might also find dark chocolate or coffee notes, and if it's aged in oak, you could even get those leathery, tobacco-y notes. It can be very complex.
Okay, see, now we're talking.
Right.
I do love a wine with some complexity, and it sounds like Carmenere really delivers that full sensory experience. You've got the aromas, but what about the actual taste on the palate? What am I feeling there?
So Carmenere has smooth tannins.
Okay.
And as you know, tannins are what give you that dry sensation in your mouth. Now, a younger Carmenere will typically have those silkier tannins, while those aged bottles develop more robust, more, grippy tannins.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying it's a wine that can age gracefully?
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of the body, Carmenere usually falls somewhere between medium to full-bodied, which makes it really versatile for pairing with food. But I think the real star of the show is its acidity. Carmenere has this bright acidity that's really refreshing. It's like a final squeeze of citrus that just makes you want to go back for another sip.
Ooh, I love that description. You had mentioned oak aging a couple of minutes ago. How does that process impact Carmenere's flavor?
Oak aging really just adds another layer of depth and complexity.
Okay.
Think vanilla, toasty notes, sometimes even a hint of smokiness. And, the type of oak they use, how long they age it for, all of that plays a big role in shaping those final flavors. It's what makes each bottle so unique.
That's so cool. So you got the grape itself, and then you have all of these winemaking techniques that can also influence the final product. It's like a true collaboration.
For sure.
Speaking of collaboration, we've talked a lot about Chile, but are there other regions where I might stumble upon a decent bottle of Carmenere?
Chile is definitely the go-to for Carmenere, but it is being explored in other countries too.
Yeah.
We're seeing some cool things coming out of Washington State, for example.
Oh, really?
A few experimental vineyards in Australia, and even some in Brazil. It's pretty niche, but it's out there.
Wow. So if I'm out there and I happen to see a bottle of non-Chilean Carmenere on the shelf, is it worth grabbing?
I think so, yeah. But keep in mind that Chile still holds the crown for those, really classic Carmenere characteristics.
Okay, good to know. So when it comes to Chile specifically, are there any regions that really stand out for Carmenere? Like, are there specific spots that are just killing it in the Carmenere game? Since we're talking about regions, that reminds me of that article you shared about Chilean wine regions and how those specific areas influence Carmenere? I'm ready to get into those details.
Yeah, terroir is key. And Chile has some really prime Carmenere regions.
Good.
Take the Veleno Maipo, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's southeast of Santiago, known for its warm days, cool nights, and you get these amazing Carmeneres from there with those really intense aromas of like ripe black fruit and that signature spice.
Sounds like my kind of place. What about other regions? I remember reading about one that's known for producing Carmenere with like those plum and chocolate notes.
Ah, you're probably thinking of the Valle Colchagua.
Oh,
It's south of Val do Maipo, and it's got those alluvial soils, decomposed granite, clay, which bring this really nice structure and complexity to the wines.
interesting.
You'll often find those lovely notes of plum, blackberry, even that hint of chocolate that you mentioned in Carmenere is from that region.
Okay, I'm making notes. Now, this is kind of a switch from Chilean regions, but I'm curious about something. You mentioned organic and biodynamic vineyards earlier.
Yeah.
Does that apply to Carmenere at all? And
Yeah.
and does it actually impact the flavor? That's always been a little fuzzy for me, to be honest.
It's a great question. And you're in luck because, more and more Chilean producers are embracing organic and biodynamic practices, especially with Carmenere.
Oh, wow. That's great to hear. But I guess what I'm wondering is, how does that actually translate to the taste of the wine?
Well, there's no magic formula, but a lot of winemakers and even some of those articles you shared suggest that these wines often have a certain um, vibrancy, a purity of flavor that really captures the essence of the terroir.
Okay.
It's like the difference between a supermarket tomato and one that's been vine ripened in your backyard.
Okay, yeah, I can get on board with that analogy.
Mm.
Now, we can't really talk about the future of wine without talking about climate change, can we? Is that impacting Carmenere at all? I feel like that would be a big
Mm.
concern, especially for a grape that's already had such a close call.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something winemakers are closely monitoring, especially because Carmenere is a late ripening grape. As temperatures rise, there's always that risk of the grits getting overripe,
Yeah.
leading to higher alcohol levels and, potentially throwing off those beautiful balanced flavors that we love.
So what are winemakers doing about it? What's the solution?
Well, they're adapting. Some are experimenting with planting Carmenere in cooler sites, like higher elevations or areas closer to the coast where it's a bit cooler.
Oh,
Others are, changing up their vineyard management techniques, like tweaking their pruning schedules or using cover crops to help the soil retain moisture.
So they were like really getting creative to try and combat those challenges.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You mentioned earlier that Carmenere was a key player in those classic Bordeaux blends before, phylloxera hit.
Yeah.
Are winemakers using it in blends these days at all?
That's a really fascinating point. While Carmenere definitely shines as a single varietal wine, you're right. Some winemakers are starting to kind of, reintroduce it to blends,
Oh, really?
often with its old Bordeaux friends like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, things like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it adds this really wonderful layer of complexity. That peppery spice and the lush fruit they play so well with those other grapes.
It's like welcoming it back to the family.
Exactly. And I think this resurgence of blends points to like a larger shift in the wine world right now. It's a move away from like those really rigid rules.
Right.
It's more about experimentation and rediscovering, those kind of forgotten
I
traditions.
love that. The more the merrier, I always say. So we know Chile's like the king of Carmenere,
Yeah.
but are there any other countries that are giving Chile a run for its money? Like, is anyone coming close?
Chile still wears the crown.
Okay.
But Argentina they're becoming a serious contender in the Carmenere game,
Oh, interesting.
particularly in the Mendoza region.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how would you say that Argentinian Carmenere differs from like a Chilean Carmenere?
Well, Argentina, with its higher altitude vineyards and, the intense sunlight, they produce a much bolder style of Carmenere.
Oh,
Think more robust tannins, more structure,
okay.
compared to those softer, fruitier Chilean expressions.
Interesting.
You often get these like amazing savory notes from Argentinian Carmenere olives, herbs, even a hint of leather sometimes.
Wow. Okay, so it's like a whole other side of Carmenere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I'm adding Argentina to my list of like wine regions to explore for sure. I do have one last question about regions though. You mentioned that Carmenere was originally a Bordeaux grape, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about its success in Chile and now Argentina.
Yeah.
But is there any chance it'll ever make a comeback in its, like, homeland of Bordeaux?
I mean, it's definitely a long shot,
Yeah.
but there are some really like passionate winemakers in Bordeaux who are doing some experimental plantings of Carmenere.
Get out. So there's hope for, like, a homecoming? That'd be so cool.
It's a slow process, but it's happening. Maybe someday we'll be sipping 100% Carmenere straight from Bordeaux. Who knows?
I love that you're optimistic.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about its, like, whole journey and how things have come full circle. Okay, so we've covered a lot about Carmenere, its crazy history, all those unique flavors, what the future holds for this comeback grape. I think it's time for a little rapid fire round.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
always find that's the best way to, like, wrap things up. All right, so rapid fire round. You ready for this?
Hit me.
Okay, so first up, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but what's your absolute favorite way to enjoy Carmenere? Like, you've got all this knowledge.
Oh, man.
What's your go-to?
I love a good cheese pairing. Give me a Carmenere and like a perfectly aged Gouda.
Okay.
I'm a happy camper.
I mean, you can't go wrong with a classic cheese pairing, right? Okay. Okay. Let's say someone's never actually tried Carmenere before. They're ready to take the plunge, though.
Yeah.
What bottle would you recommend for, like, a first foray into the Carmenere world?
Ooh, first foray.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I think for a really like special introduction to Carmenere, I'd have to go with the Vigna Errázuriz Don Maximiano Founders Reserve.
Okay.
It's a bit of an investment, but it really showcases everything that Carmenere can be.
Ooh, okay. Sophisticated.
It's elegant. It's complex. Yeah, it's a good one.
Got it. Consider it added to my wine list. Okay, final question. You've got one sentence and one sentence only to give us your elevator pitch for why everyone should give Carmenere a try. Go.
Oh, man, one sentence. Okay. Carmenere is a grape that, it just defies expectations, bold flavors, resilient history, and it will completely change how you view Chilean wine.
I love it. Well, there you have it. That wraps up our deep dive into the wonderful world of Carmenere. We've, journeyed through its past, explored its present, and even gotten a little glimpse into its future.
It's got a bright future.
It really does. Now it's your turn. Go uncork a bottle and experience it for yourself. Cheers.